In the course of his life, man finds himself set between two powers. There is a current of events, the steady flow of facts around him that make the most varied impression on him. Opposed to this stands man's own power within his inner being. One need consider life but superficially to have it dawn upon one that man must find a necessary balance between the forces and facts that storm in from all sides and what unfolds in his inner life. When in his everyday life the human being has taken in impression upon impression, then he yearns to be alone, to collect and compose his soul. He feels that only in the right balancing of outer and inner will he find salvation in life. A penetrating aphorism of Goethe expresses this for the depths and breadth of life, indeed as a very riddle of being. For every force sweeps outward into space to live and work, here, there, and everywhere, while on the other hand the teeming world from every side confines and takes away. Between the inner strife and outer conflict, the spirit hears a word slow comprehended. From powers that fetter every living being, that man is free who overcomes himself. The secret. In these last two lines of Goethe lies life wisdom to the inner being of man that moves forward stormily, to this potentiality in him that is continually developing and unfolding. There stands opposed what approaches us from the outside. When we overcome ourselves, we find a balance. These we can take as themes for the considerations that will occupy us here. Both themes belong together. First, we will devote ourselves to the subject of illusory illness, and as a necessary complement, then consider the feverish pursuit of health. Only in the course of our considerations can these words be justified. They lead us into the spiritual streams of the present and into that with which spiritual science confronts them, with which spiritual science has to set itself as a task against them. In connection with the words illusory illness, men think at first of the fact that someone really feels pain and discomfort based on a more or less self-induced illness. Right, here we have an area into which spiritual science, with its cultural calling, must step. Important things depend on this activity. Before we go into detail about what spiritual science has to say by way of comment on this, let us observe some pictures out of the life of the present. On one of my journeys, there were two other persons in my compartment, a lady and a gentleman, who soon began conversing. The gentleman behaved in a remarkable way. After but a few words, he laid himself out on the seat, and said that only so positioned could he bear living. The lady recounted how she came from east of where they were, and had been to a Baltic spa. The day before, she had been struck with homesickness, and had decided to go home. Then she burst into tears. Because of the lady's crying, the gentleman hit upon the idea of recounting the story of his health. I suffer from many illnesses, and journey from sanitarium to sanitarium without finding health. Whereupon the lady replied, I too understand much about illness. Many people in my homeland thank me for their health and life. The gentleman told of one of his numerous illnesses, whereupon the lady, from her heart's wide knowledge, gave him a prescription that the man wrote down. After a few minutes, the second illness was recounted, etc., until beaming he had written down 13 prescriptions. The gentleman had but one sorrow. Will be arriving in Berlin at 9. Will it still be possible to have the prescriptions filled? The lady comforted him, saying that it would still be possible. Strangely enough, it never occurred to the gentleman that the lady herself was ill. The lady remarked further that yes, she had much sympathy, and she counted up her own illnesses, and told of all the places to which she had gone to be healed. The gentleman recommended a book by Laman to her. Thereupon, she told of her second illness, and the second brochure was recommended, until she had noted the titles of 5 or 6 brochures she would buy the next day. Finally, she wrote down Laman's address. Meanwhile, they had arrived in Berlin. Each had written down the other's recommendations and gone off satisfied. Whoever observed these people with an eye for the situation under consideration soon saw that there was something not quite right about the lady. As for the man, he only lacked the will to be healthy. Had he summoned the will to be healthy, he would have been in good health. Here we have something symptomatic of what meets us frequently at present, and the scrutinizing glance will be able to pass from this picture to another. Were we to travel in mountainous country, we would see old fortresses, decaying castles, etc., that remind us of old times when striving for spirit strength existed, or where outer power ruled. These fortresses have fallen into ruins, but everywhere in the vicinity of these monuments to power, one can see sanatoria, one near the other. This picture presented itself to me recently in an area especially rich in these institutions, when I found it necessary to stop at such a sanatorium for a short time. The inmates were just taking their midday meal. The conviction I gained was that of the 100 there, no one really needed the sanitarium life. Let us now move on to the more intimate pictures that we find in the accounts of thoughtful present-day physicians. Fortunately, there are some doctors who concern themselves also with the soul in the body. I choose an example by a doctor who would surely look upon everything theosophic as madness. His kind are most surely those who are without doubt not to be influenced by what spiritual science may have to say. Such a prominent physician has recorded many different cases of people such as those in the train I mentioned, only as a specially grotesque example. This physician was called to attend a girl who showed all the symptoms of meningitis, but the physician had a good clinical sense. When he was alone with her, he questioned her with such questions as were suitable under these circumstances, but all his questions elicited no pertinent answers. Finally, it came out that the young lady was to leave school. In the following year, however, there were to be especially interesting lectures that she wanted to hear. Since all the family opposed her wish to remain in school, she fell ill. The physician said, "I shall intervene that you may still remain in school, but you must get up out bed immediately and come to the table. This she did. After a few minutes, the young lady appeared at the table and was no longer ill. Let's take another example. Another physician, a skillful one and well-known, for whom I have always had a certain regard, had to perform a knee operation. The patient's brother was present. During the operation, the knee cracked, whereupon the brother suffered excruciating pain. The operation went off well, but the brother became ill. A whole year went by before he was again well. Thus one can see what power fantasy and perverted imagination can have on the soul, and how from out of the soul imitations of disease resembling a truly genuine disease picture can arise. But the physician may not go too far in this. The one just mentioned was very skillful. He did not allow himself to be deceived by accepting that matters forever continue as they first appear. A lady came to him one time, who, since her husband's death, was suffering unbearable pain in her knee. She had been treated by many doctors who always came to the conclusion that her sickness was associated with soul aspects, had to do with the impact of her husband's death upon her. Not that the physician of healthy outlook sought for some soul aberration. He found that in this case a large corn on the hill was a provocation. After the operation, he sent the lady to convalesce at Gashtan in order not to appear to expose his colleagues too much. So now we see the situation illumined by a variety of pictures. You see how strongly the illusion, the soul picture, can react on a bodily organism. One could well say that in this instance, it is not a question of actual illness, but of illusory illness. Whoever has come to the realization, however, that everything corporeal is an expression of spirit, that everything that meets our senses is an expression of the spirit, will not take the matter so lightly. Even in seemingly quite remote matters, we find that it is often a question of soul influences on the body. The illusion, which at the beginning appears trivial and ridiculous, when it turns into pains, often leads to the beginning of an actual illness, and often to further stages. Such illusions are more than something to be disposed of with a mere shrug of shoulders. If we are to penetrate more deeply into these occurrences, we must call up before the soul the oft-presented picture of the nature and being of man. To spiritual science, what the human being presents at first glance is only an outer aspect. The physical body is a member among other members of the human being that he has in common with all other beings around him. Beyond the physical body, he has the body of etheric forces that penetrates the physical body, as is true for every living being. This ether body battles against the destruction of the physical body. The third member is the astral body, the bearer of desire and apathy, joy and sorrow, passion and sensual appetites, of the lowest drives as well as of the highest ideals. This body man has in common with the animal world, that whereby man is the crown of creation, whereby he differentiates himself from all other beings, is his I, his ego. We must consider these four members as constituting the whole man. We must, however, be clear that all that makes itself visible to our eyes derives from the spirit. There is no material thing that does not have a spiritual basis.